This is Dead Serious, a show about short horror stories worthy of discussion. I'm Dead Palette, and it's Halloween month, firefighters. Today we're taking a look at a story that is written by a patron of mine, that was suggested by them for critique. This is Mr.Greater, written by Lalaulet10. You can find this story on toospooky.com under the critique section, where I encourage people to go help critique stories to improve them. Let's sharpen each other, people. Let's get right into this. I was about 10 years old when my brother, Greg, was born, and I honestly hated him. I'm going to stop you right there. Is this over the garden wall? My parents always gave Greg the most attention, and to my underdeveloped mind, this meant they loved him more than me. I grew out of this mindset when I turned 14, when it finally dawned on me that Greg was a little kid, and I could take care of myself for the most part. I will admit it did help that I had broken my leg while riding my bike down a huge hill in town, and my friends rushed to my house to get to my mom. That was the first time my mom had carried me since I was 9. And even Greg seemed to understand something was wrong with his toddler mind. So far, a very down-to-earth approach, nothing too much just happening just yet. Kind of having someone's bones being broken. That is a very formative memory, very memorable things for people, obviously, and that is right picking. You see that kind of technique this kind of subject matter being brought up in Pen Pal, and I'm interested to see where this is going to go. Once I got into high school, I had become accustomed to helping Greg get ready for school in the morning. I packed his lunch and mine at the same time, got him breakfast, usually peanut butter Captain Crunch, and sat him down to watch Sesame Street before my mother woke up to get him dressed. However, aside from that, I didn't spend much time with my little brother. I was more interested in the usual things a guy my age was, playing Halo 2's multiplayer and Magic the Gathering with my friends, or my girlfriend and her obsession. Well, fuck you in this story for the most blatant ass pandering, the Lalaulet10, this insane pandering. Oh, fuck this story. Or my girlfriend and her obsession with weird anime like Boogie Pop Phantom or Paranoia Agent. If it's not obvious, it is obvious that you're fucking pandering to me. If it's not obvious, I was a kid, kind of a nerd, a lucky nerd because of the already mentioned girlfriend, but still a nerd. Now, I'm always advocating for the Fleming effect, where you add minute details that seem like they don't mean anything. That way you can ground a story, and what's more, you can hide information. The question I have is, will this whole girlfriend liking Boogie Pop Phantom and Paranoia Agent thing pan out? What exactly is going to be done with this? And I'm always concerned about horror being referenced in horror. It's always got to be tasteful and interesting. So if you're going to be doing this as some sort of callback to subject matter tackled in Boogie Pop Phantom or Paranoia Agent, then that's one thing. I'm curious how this is going to pan out, and I'll let you know how I feel near the end of the story. But let me know what you guys feel, and also go watch Boogie Pop Phantom immediately. I like that we're getting a good sense of who this narrator is, that they're a good big brother kind of character, being so responsible as to take care of their brother even before the mother is woken up, before they go to school and everything. That's a lot of responsibility. Greg, on the other hand, loved to do one thing and one thing only, and that was drawing. He would sketch out chunky-bodied cats, people with egg-shaped hands, dinosaurs that he loved from the Land Before Time series, usually little kid stuff that most people draw when they're around 6 or 7. I remember when Greg showed me his drawing of Mr.Greater. It was summer, and I had just gotten back from swinging. We had a swinging party at the local public pool. Back from swimming at the local public pool with my friends. I was walking into the house when Greg rushed up to me like an SUV trying to cut off a person in the next lane. That's a good simile or metaphor, whichever one. I hate that there's two different terms for that. I like the details of the things that he liked to draw, that Greg liked to draw, because instead of just saying childish things, you give some pretty interesting examples that switch up what they are. Cats, chunky-bodied cats, so he's drawing fat cats. That's, animals. And then people with egg-shaped hands, that is, an example that is oddly specific, and then you switch it up to an intellectual property being mentioned of Land Before Time dinosaurs. Those are giving you a really good grounding for what this kid liked to draw, and I do like the name Mr.Greater. I'm curious to see what that's going to pan out to be. Joey, my little brother was jumping up and down, excited to the point of my being worried he was going to pee himself. I gotta show you something. Before I could say a word, he ran off to the kitchen and flew back to me with a piece of paper in his hand. I took the page, expecting the usual Garfield-like cat with a joke written on it that only a 6-year-old would get, but instead I saw a jumbled mess of what looked like arms and legs plastered together. The shape in the middle of all of the legs looked like a glob of strawberry jelly. I could see what looked like hundreds of eyes and teeth drawn all over the pages with strings of jelly connecting them to the main body. So I don't know what to say about that, besides that it's really vivid and really good. Trying to figure out, it's not entirely uncommon for the trope of child drawing is a horrific thing, but coming up with something new and unique is kind of difficult. And here's a pretty lengthy, ropey money shot, if you ask me. Using the term like globs of strawberry jam, legs and arms plastered together, that I think is pretty good. I would also recommended listening would be the Victoria Kindergarten Project by The Little Fears. The story in that video also has a pretty interesting description of, some sort of potential monster. Greg, I began, still staring at the page. What is this? It's Mr.Greater, my brother replied It's Mr.Greater, my brother replied in a bored tone, like I had just asked him, what sound a cow makes? Does he look cool? I nodded. I like that. I nodded because that's what you gotta do when you're an adult. A kid brings a picture to you, and it's just like, oh yeah, I nodded. It was really the only thing I could think of doing aside from asking Greg if I could keep the picture. I knew our mom would freak out if she saw my little bro drawing stuff like this. She'd probably send him to a shrink or something. I thought that maybe the movies Mom would watch with us, like Poltergeist and Beetlejuice, had made my little brother feel like drawing some weird shit from a nightmare or something. So diegetically, mentioning Poltergeist and Beetlejuice, those are horror/creepy related things that you can understand being mentioned in a story, and they're less obvious of name drops here, because those are movies that I think a lot of young children see that are scary to them. Moments in Beetlejuice are scary to children. Poltergeist is a movie that a lot of children of a certain generation saw before what most parents would deem as a recommended time for them to be mature enough to see a movie like that. This, I think, is more successful than shamelessly fucking mentioning Boogie Pop so I can give the story a good review. Ooh, reading now. That's a weird cutoff from me just laughing to what I'm about to read. Greg died when I turned 23, while I was living in another town with my girlfriend from high school. I had been working as a clerk in Barnes & Noble when I got a call on my lunch break. My mom was crying when she called me. It got to the point where I could barely understand her when my grandmother took the phone from her gently and told me that Greg had been driving home from school when a drunk driver crashed into his car. Neither of them were wearing seatbelts, and the driver and the passenger of the car, along with Craig, got tossed from the car like a baseball from an MLB star pitcher. Okay, so this is your little brother in a car accident. I don't know that you would describe them as being thrown from a car like an MLB star pitcher. That's very vivid, but that's something that I don't think a brother would have that kind of dark humor about their little brother dying, you know. As for the grounding about working at Barnes & Noble and stuff like that, that all is working for me. I enjoy that. When I got off the phone with my grandmother, my phone buzzed with a new text. My friend, a guy who worked just down the street from the school, saw the whole thing and told me that he was sorry for my loss. I asked him what the bodies looked like. I wanted to know if I'd be able to see my brother one last time before they put him in a fucking hole. My friend did his best to describe it without throwing up. Arms and legs were everywhere. Blood and bone and muscle looked like chewing gum. Eyes and teeth all over the street. That's when I remembered the picture of Mr.Greater, and that's also when I doubled over and began to vomit on the red and blue carpet of the Barnes & Noble. Number of things here. I totally thought that Mr.Greater was going to be some sort of monster, and I think a lot of people were probably thinking the same thing, and doubling back, the little brother is asking, does he look cool? And the big brother nodded, and I wonder if there's some sort of connection there. I don't know necessarily how to feel about the description of the muscle look like chewing gum, because again, this is a sensitive subject to the people in question, so would they describe it that way? However, devil's advocate, possessive, it does further the image of Mr.Greater, so that's something where you're going to have to wrestle with that and figure out what the best course of action is. But I would definitely say the MLB star pitcher thing is unnecessary. And the profanity along the lines of, see him one last time before they put him in a fucking hole, that is more believable. That's the kind of thing that you might say out of grief, you know. It's been 10 years since I watched my brother's casket be lowered into the ground, and not a day goes by where I don't think about that picture. I still have it. I can't get rid of it. It's the only picture of Greg's that I kept from back then. My girlfriend, now my wife, didn't leave my side until she knew I'd be okay. I love her with all my heart, to the point where we had a child. My daughter, Gina, is 7 now, and she loves to draw, just like her uncle she makes the same chunky cat people with chunky cats and people with egg-shaped hands. But instead of dinosaurs, she moved to Pokemon, her favorites Meowth. The other day, when I got home from work, she rushed over to me like a rabbit and gave me a hug. I picked her up, as usual, and carried her into the kitchen to see what she had drawn. On the table was a picture of some sort of lamprey thing with huge teeth. A mouth seemed to be ripped around the edges, and was in a back of the mouth like you could see right through it. Which Pokemon is that, sweetie? I asked, expecting some name I hadn't heard yet from the anime. That's not a Pokemon, Daddy, my little girl giggled, turning to me with an adorable smile. That's Mr.Greater. I like that story. I like it. It has sort of a weird cosmic ending. The idea of, instead of having some sort of monster be drawn by a child, and that's the thing, this innocent childlike drawing is something evil and demonic, instead of doing that, having it be an omen of something to come, I think is an interesting angle on this. I really enjoyed this. I want to know what other people think. But fortunately, we have a comment from Stex85, who we've read his stories on Undercooked Analysis before. He's right below on Too Spooky, and he makes a comment. Nice, definitely like what you did there. Only real issue I'd say is maybe describing the brother's drawing a bit more in depth, just so when the accident happened, it's clear that the pictures of, like his body. Admittedly, I'm not sure what the best way to do that would be. Maybe he draws his body lying with limbs all in the wrong directions. Something along those lines, if that makes sense. Otherwise, definitely enjoyed it, especially ending. That was pretty killer. Yeah, I think that the way that the picture is described is really good, but you could probably push that more. What happens if you give it another revision and push it more and see what you can get away with? I think that would be advisable. But this is a writing community. Let the Lawlette 10 know what you think down in the comments, or better yet, or just as good, because please leave comments and everything. TooSpooky.com, check them out, because that's great. Now, if you enjoyed that, please consider helping out the community and supporting my channel. You can support the community by conversing in the comments below, going to TooSpooky.com for original horror stories, and trying your hand at short horror yourself. You can support me by liking this video, following me on Twitter and Tumblr, links in the description, and checking out my art page, which is also down below. Thank you so much for your time, and now on to our sponsor at this non-moment in time, which is Lemonheads. Lemonheads. Unacceptable.